All right, Bad Billy off into the sunset, doing non-Brokeback Mountain things, mind you.
Presumably, yeah.
No, not presumably. Well, Matt, now we got you alone. Obviously, we're now, since we're both part of Dare, and we I mentioned, what happened to me on my wrestling show, and I know you probably want to go ahead and let your cat out of the bag as well. That you were part of this one show for a long ass time, a lot longer than I was part of this wrestling show.
Yeah.
And just the backstory on what happened with you and a so-called best friend that just turned ugly, and for what I understand, over the flip of a coin.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very strange. Well, of course, you're referring to my falling out at Retro Spectrum Radio, the show that I used to do on Friday nights on WMNH. And I've never talked about it on my show because I'll never, because Retro Spectrum Radio is Friday nights, and then my show, Matt Connarton Unleashed, is Saturday morning. And I've never talked about it on my show, and I never will, because as long as Paul and I have shows on the same station, when I talked about it, I mean, I did address it the next morning on my show. I took the high road, and I just said, my time on Retro Spectrum Radio has ended, and, I wish everyone well, and it was a great ride, and 16 years, I was there from the beginning, and all that. But, I tried to keep it very positive, and I'll never say anything bad about it while I'm on WMNH, while I'm actually on the air there, because again, Paul and I are both still there. So, we're both playing on that team. We're both wearing that jersey, so to speak, to use a sports metaphor, which is always awkward because I'm not a sports guy. But, so I would never, because people asked me about it afterward, and people were asking me, well, are you going to talk about it on your show? And I was like, well, I'll talk about it. I might talk about it on somebody else's show, but I'll never talk about it on WMNH. I'll only say positive things on WMNH, because he and I, we never see each other. Our paths don't cross anymore, but he and I are technically still colleagues at the station. So while I'm there, I'll never say anything on the air, but but I have no problem talking about it outside of there. So, but well,
yeah, let's hear all the dirty details on it, since this is a forum for you to go ahead and dive into that.
So essentially what happened, the reason my run on there ended, and I'm going to be very careful to, since I am going to talk about it. Actually, this will be my first time talking about it publicly. But again, I haven't really had an opportunity to, outside of my own show. And like I said, I won't do it on my own show.
Understood.
I'm going to be very careful though to only tell you the facts. In other words, I'm not going to try to add my own commentary into it or anything, or say anything insulting about anybody. I'll just tell you what happened, a fact-based account. That way nobody can say, oh, Matt said this and he shouldn't have said this, or this was out of line. I'm just going to tell you the facts of what happened, objectively what happened. Okay. So my last night on the show, Friday nights, I would always get there early. I was always the first one there. And part of the reason for that was I like to get there before anyone else, so I could do last minute prep for my show Saturday morning. So all the music I was going to play, any new bumpers or liners I wanted to use, anything at all, any audio that I was going to play on my show Saturday morning, I wanted to make sure was loaded into the computer and ready to go for Saturday morning. So I would get there early. I would get all the pre-production taken care of, and then I'm good. And then I would, and I'd always have my computer with me so I can get some work done while I wait for Paul and whomever else is going to be on the show with us that night to show up. And that particular night, so, seemed like a pretty normal night. And I had let in, I think the other two guys that were in the room that night were already there. And Paul gets there, or one of the two guys was already there. Paul gets there, and right from the get-go, he was acting strange, wasn't talking, wasn't saying much. It was like, I greeted him when he walked in. He said hello, but he was being very, very quiet. And, it's not unusual for him to come in grumpy, but because he's a grumpy guy. Again, I'm just speaking objectively. That's just a fact. Anyone who knows him will tell you that.
Right.
But he was being,
and that's nothing negative. It's just like, hey, listen, you have your off days. You're going to come in with either a chip on your shoulder or something personal probably happened that you're not too happy about. So yeah, you're not going to come in the best of mood sometimes.
Right. And as a friend, I would always ask him, if he came in and he was upset, or I said, hey, Paul, how's it going? And he said, I had a terrible day. As a friend, I would ask, because I'm an empathetic person. I would ask him, what happened? What's wrong? Do you want to talk about it? And he often would. He would often confide in me, because I thought he and I were good friends. I always considered him a really good friend, but this particular night, he was being very quiet. He was acting strangely. Yes or no answers to things. He just really seemed in his own head. And then, so the show starts, and I don't know if you've ever listened to Paul's show, but there's usually a segment of a couple of songs at the beginning of the show and maybe a comedy bit. And then you hear the intro music, and then he, brings up the mics and we start the show.
Something similar to what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So we get a couple of minutes into that part, and I don't know, I made a joke he didn't like or something. And all of a sudden he just stops and he says, that's it for the show. Good night, everybody. And he pulls down all the faders on the board, and he flips the feed over to the replay of last week's show. So we're not live anymore. All of a sudden the replay is on from the previous week. And he goes, I'm sorry I wasted everyone's time tonight. And he starts packing up his stuff. He's putting away his laptop. And so me and the other two guys who were in the room, we're just kind of sitting there like, so I spoke up and I said, what's happening right now? I don't understand. And that's when he flipped out at me, and he starts yelling at me. He goes, you're being a fucking tool, and your joke is stupid, and you're ruining the show. And he just unloaded on me. And he's just yelling at me.
Do you remember what the joke was?
The joke was it was just something silly about, and I wish I had the audio to refer to, but I don't, because he erased it.
Yeah.
But the joke, if I remember correctly, was something like, because he had this dumb bit that he does every week about how, because on Retro Spectrum Radio, we're going back in time. So we're going to jump into the DeLorean and we're going to go back in time. And he said something about we're going to run and jump into the DeLorean. And I just made some silly joke, very typical of me. I just said something like, well, I think maybe we should step instead of running and jumping into the DeLorean, maybe we should step into it carefully, because there's a lot of very sensitive electronics in there. We don't want anything to go wrong. And that pissed him off.
Seriously? Wow.
I'm serious. That was the moment. And he pulls down all the faders and he just starts yelling at me. And in 16 years of working with him,
16. Even longer than I thought it was. 16.
Now, I should say not 16 years consecutively. There were gaps where he didn't do the show. But
still, that's a long ass time.
Yeah. He'd never, I was shocked. So he just unloaded on me. And I did, and I did do something uncharacteristic of me. I actually started yelling back at him, because there was one particular thing he said to me that really got under my skin. It's very unusual for me to yell. Like, for me to actually raise my voice at another human being is very, very rare.
Right.
But I did. And I will not. And that's the one thing I will not reveal. I will not reveal what he said to me for a couple of different reasons that really pissed me off. But it did piss me off. So I started yelling back at him. Also, too, you don't get to just stand there and yell at me and me not react. I mean, I'm not a bitch. I'm not just going to take that. So I did yell back at him. And I kind of mocked him too. And this might be the one thing that I do regret a little bit, is because there had been a previous incident where he was kind of mean to me on the air. where he said some mean things about my show that I actually enjoyed. I thought it was an interesting segment, and I just give it right back to him when he did that. So I didn't even take any of it personally, but he was worried that he had hurt me, and he called me that Sunday crying. He called me to apologize. So I mocked him because I was so angry with him and how he was treating me. And by the way, this is in front of other people too. This isn't even in private, just him and me.
This is like a couple of co-hosts, right?
This is in front of yes, other people who are there. And we're in a professional environment. We're in a radio station. This isn't an argument happening at the bar. We're in a professional environment, and this is how he's treating me. And so I, as I was walking out the door, I go, "Oh, by the way, are you going to call me Sunday crying because you're sorry about how you treated me tonight?" I did say that to him, but he had that coming. I mean, he just unloaded on, and he said weird things to me that didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Like at one point he told me, "You know what, Matt, you need to get a job. You need it. It's time you just got a fucking job." He said something like that. It's like, dude, I have multiple, like, I'm like the busiest person I know. What are you talking about? But it's just, that didn't even make any sense. And I almost wondered if he was having a psychotic break in that moment, because what he was saying to me wasn't even making sense. It's like, what are you even talking about? Anyway,
start talking in tongues or something.
No. but yeah, so I left, and that was it.
Ever since that day, that night, for that matter, has he or you even spoken a word to each other?
No, but I'm going to reveal to you something, Charles. I'm going to reveal to you something that no one else knows.
Ooh.
Unless he's told anyone, because the only person who would know is him. I haven't told anyone this. I did, after a few weeks had gone by, after 2 or 3 weeks maybe had gone by, I did send him an email. And I basically just said in the email, I really regret the way things ended. I don't ever want to come back to the show. I don't want anything to do with the show, but I do think it's really shitty that 16 years of friendship just goes up in flames in a matter of seconds over a joke that you didn't like. And, but I also, in the email, I said, I don't regret yelling back at you, because I'm going to defend myself. And I don't like the way that you treated me. And this is in no way an apology for anything, but, I do think it would be good if at some point someday, maybe we can find our way to at least talking, because I considered you a very close friend. And, I don't have a lot of close friends, Charles. I've always kept a very tight inner circle. I have almost no social life to speak of, not because I try to isolate myself or anything. It's just, I'm a natural introvert. So, I'm not someone who, you're not going to see me at the bar having some drinks, hanging out with some buddies. It's just not me. But I considered him a very close friend. And I thought he felt that way about me, because that dude has confided a lot, way more than I've ever confided in him, because I don't really confide much in people. But he has confided a lot in me over the years.
Yeah. Did he ever reply back to the email?
No, did not a peep.
There's a couple of comments in there from Parks. Says, I love how people overreact to an off-the-cuff comment. In other words, their understanding of what was said was scared by the image of self-worth in their own heads. There was a question here. Was there a previous incident involving delicate electronics harboring blah, blah, blah? Was there anything that may have triggered it?
No. I don't know. I do know that I can't tell you that there's been a pattern over the years of other people being chased off. I'm sure
not somebody that's been around for 16 years.
No, I never thought it would be me. He finally got to me. It was finally my turn, I guess. So
you were trying to take over the limelight, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know if it's there was something, and by the way, this is on YouTube. I did post this on YouTube. There is something from back in January that I put on YouTube on the IPM Nation channel titled "The Beginning of the End: Paul versus Matt," and it's actually the segment where about which he called me in tears to apologize, and it's him being kind of mean to me and saying insulting things to me about my show.
What did you have against your show? I mean, was this the weekly one or the one that was on the Saturday now?
Saturday mornings. Yeah.
So he had a problem with your show or had issues with your show of interviewing musicians.
Yeah.
And leaders of Manchester.
He was saying my show was weak and I should just end it and all this. But the thing is, and people have a hard time understanding this because other people who heard it were upset on my behalf. Like, well, Paul was really mean to you. And I was just like, well, actually, I thought it was a fun segment because when Paul would get like that with me, I would always just kind of give it back to him and sort of laugh in his face, which I thought was fun. I would never let him get under my skin ever.
Right.
So I was, so I thought it was an interesting segment and I thought it was compelling radio, and conflict often makes for compelling radio. So I actually had no problem with it.
Which is why you've spent all that time engaging with Crazy Joe, because that
right.
you thought was compelling radio.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So, I didn't have a problem with it. I wish that, the final meltdown, I wish that had happened on the air. If that had happened on the air, I would have been in my glory. That would have been great radio, but it didn't.
Yeah, that would have been like the news or something like that. Flame out in Manchester.
Yeah.
That would have been great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have loved to hear. I would have just loved to hear the whole rant between you and him back and forth.
Right.
I'm sure the two other co-hosts were just popping popcorn, like sitting back, watching, eating popcorn.
Yeah. Well, those two guys, I won't say their
next.
I won't say their. Well, yeah.
You don't have to say their names. I'm just saying.
Everyone, everyone gets chased off there eventually.
Except the man behind the board.
The only thing is, the thing that was very clarifying about it for me, though, is I realized that those guys are not my friends either. Because, and I'm not mad at them. I don't even resent them for continuing to do the show. I do not. And anyone who, and there's other people too who continue to do the show who are not there that night. But the thing that I realized about them is if let me put it this way, if you were in that room when this was happening and I was being treated that way, if you were in that room and you can witness me being treated the way that I was being treated,
yep,
and you can still come back the next week, because I did tune in to next week's show. If you can just come back next week and be backslapping and yucking it up with the person who treated me that way, in other words, you're completely fine with it. You have no problem with it. You've offered your tacit approval for the way that I was treated. Then you're not my friend. So I'm not mad at those guys. Obviously, they like doing the show. Good for them. But I do understand now they're not my friends. They're acquaintances. They're people I know, but they're not my friends.
The people that do that show, do they have anything to gain by doing it besides just being on the radio?
Yes. Okay. One of them is a singer-songwriter from the area who started doing the show and then also started playing a lot of gigs. And I think for that individual, the show is a vehicle for him to help promote his music career. So he's getting something out of it. Okay. Very, very nice person. Someone I considered a friend. I now realize he's not my friend, and that's perfectly fine. He's an acquaintance. He's a guy I used to do a radio show with, and that's fine.
But do you only consider that person not a friend because they continue to do the show?
Well,
even though it is a beneficial for them to, it's like, right. It's almost like, listen, I can't put business in front of friendship or friendship in front of business. This is business. I'm here for business purposes. I may not like the host, or I may not have a nice thing to say, or I definitely probably don't condone what he did.
Right.
But this benefits me as a business.
I totally get that. And I agree. And if it is benefiting him, which I believe it is, then he should continue to do the show.
But why would you say that he's not a friend? Because he's not standing up for you because he's afraid that it's going to endanger that benefit of it.
Right. Here's the thing. If you could be in that room and watch what happened and still show up every week and be completely fine with it and actually approve of and tacitly endorse it, because here's the thing. The two guys who were in that room, neither of them ever even spoke a word to Paul. I know this for a fact. Neither of them ever even bothered to say to Paul at any point, Paul, we love you. We love doing the show. The way you treated Matt, that was a little fucked up, but neither of them ever did that. You know how I know that? Because if they did, they wouldn't still be on the show.
Exactly.
They would have been driven out.
They know that. You should know that they know that. You say something to Paul, you're following Matt right out the door.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because Paul wouldn't have been able to handle that, and he would have driven them out too.
Now, are these two people, these two individuals, did you ever conversate with them off the air?
The only time I had any contact with either of them was that night. I basically sent each of them just because, and I had an ulterior motive for doing this because they were still there when I left.
Right.
But I did send them each a text message basically saying, hey, that was pretty wild, huh? Or something like that.
Just want to see the reaction.
I wanted to see what they had to say because I was curious what was said after I left. Neither of them had much to say to me, and I haven't heard from either of them since, and I'm quite sure that I never will. I don't expect I'll ever hear from either of those guys again. They've made their choice. They're happy with their choice. Good for them. And it's clarifying. And by the way, the guitar player there who's there Friday nights, he's been on my show a couple times. And if he ever wants to come on my show again, he's welcome to. If I get a text from him, he says, hey, Matt, can I come on your show? I'll have him on. No problem. But at least now I'll have him on with the understanding he's not my friend. He's an acquaintance. And he's welcome on my show. I like him. He's a nice guy, but he's not my friend. I know that. And that's fine. Totally fine. But I'll never hear from him because here's the thing. For him to actually come on my show, he would have to get approval from his boss on Friday night.
Oh, boy.
And that guy's not gonna go for that. So because Paul also does not like people who are on his show going on other people's shows. And that's why a certain person named Steve Light was driven out, because Steve Light was going on the morning show and Paul didn't like that. So now Steve Light goes on the morning show and has his own show on WMNH.
Hey, but there should be a segment that you should do one of these days, either on like a YouTube short or something. The characteristics of Crazy Joe versus Paulie C and the similarities that they have.
Oh yeah. Similarities being the narcissism, the inability to take to accept any accountability for one's actions. It's always everyone else's fault.
Yep.
The megalomania, the treating friendship as purely transactional. Some people are only your friend for as long as you are of some use to them, as long as they can get something out of you. I apparently no longer served a purpose for that particular individual because they felt that I was no longer a net positive. I was now a net negative. I was a drag on the show. So therefore, he, in his mind, had no choice but to terminate the friendship because I was no longer of use to him in his mind.
Parks goes ahead and mentions solidarity through cowardice.
Yeah, because that's the other. Cowardice is a good word because the thing is, too, if he wanted me off the show. Oh, and I did say this to him in the email that I sent to him. If he wanted me off of the show, if he felt like I was no longer contributing to the show, all he had to do, he could have done this at any point. He could just pull me aside and say, Matt, wouldn't even have to pull me aside. He could email me. He could call me. A lousy text message would have been fine. But if he had communicated to me at any point, Matt, I'm sorry. You've been with me from the beginning. It's been a great ride and I appreciate everything that you've done, but I just don't think it's quite working anymore. I don't think the chemistry is still there. I think I want to make a change with the show. So I want you to, I'm sorry, buddy, but I want you to step away. Fine. I would have accepted that. I would have, as a professional and also on a personal level, I would have appreciated him for coming to me and maturely expressing that to me. And I would have said, yeah, no problem, dude. Good luck.
It didn't sound like that's the way he operates. He operates obviously on instinct and just pure emotion.
Oh yeah. He fired someone once during the show. There's a guy, and I'm not gonna say who it is. But it's not anyone you would know.
No, right.
But this individual has since returned to the show, though, incredibly enough. But there's a person who he was so annoyed with. He actually said during one of the music breaks one night, it's not working out, dude. I think you got to go. Like during the show. This was a few years ago.
Couldn't wait till after the show's done. And no, it had to be then, huh?
It had to be then.
Wow. Well, Matt, thank you very much for sharing that. I know that's it's kind of like the exclusive right here that we got, the policy meltdown on retrospective, basically the retro rejection of Matt Connarton. So
yeah, and if he sees this or anyone sees this who wants to be mad about it or hears this and wants to be mad about it, I just explained what happened. That nothing I said was an exaggeration or a lie or anything. That is the objective truth, and I've got witnesses. Of course, those witnesses are, they
probably won't speak.
They won't. They'll never stick up for me, obviously, and that's fine. They're not my friends. I wouldn't expect them to, but that is what happened. That is the objective reality.
Yep. We're going to step aside here. We're well into our number dose, as you would say.
Numero dos.
Numero dos, right.